Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our hydrogen webinar sponsored by the North Florida Clean Fuels Coalition. I am Marcy Larson. I am serving as a co-director of our Clean Fuels Coalition, along with Elizabeth DeJesus. And we have three wonderful consultants who help us in this endeavor: Ben, James, and Victoria. We have been a Clean Fuels Coalition since 2008. We were designated in 2016 and then redesignated in 2022. We are hosted by the North Florida TPO, where Elizabeth and I also wear a couple different hats. I'm the public affairs manager and she does transportation planning. I'd like to turn the program over to Ben Moore, who will be our host today. I do want to extend a special thank you to both Des and Jonathan for your participation on this webinar. This really is pretty much the first time that we've delved very deeply into hydrogen, so we're excited to hear what both of you have to say. So with that, Ben, if you would go ahead and take over the program.
Thank you, Marcy. What a pleasure to be here today with you to talk about this exciting topic. And I want to thank you first and foremost for taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. I'm Ben Moore. I lead sustainability and resilience consulting at RS&H. And it has been just the thrill of my career to be able to work with the North Florida TPO and the North Florida Clean Fuels Coalition for almost 15 years. I feel like we've accomplished quite a lot in that time. It's a little known fact, but you all should know that North Florida displaces more gasoline and diesel fuel with clean fuels per capita than almost all other places in the United States. So Jacksonville, North Florida is a place that has really embraced clean fuels over the years, and we're still just at the beginning. There's so many opportunities for fleets to save money, to improve the health and welfare of their staff, and to be good environmental stewards. And we love bringing you the facts about those clean fuels opportunities so that you can consider them for incorporation into your operations. We have recently completed our second Clean Fuels Master Plan, which updates the master plan we did 10 years ago. That original master plan spurred several $1 million of direct investment in clean fuels projects, both on the supply and the demand side. And we are now living in a time where there's more funding available than ever before for clean fuels initiatives, again, both for the fleet and for the fueling infrastructure side of things. And so we intend this master plan to help spur the next generation of direct investment in North Florida clean fuels projects. You can view and download our master plan on our North Florida Clean Fuels website. Easy to find, just Google North Florida Clean Fuels and you'll find their master plan. The master plan is unconventional in the sense that it's a living document. So you'll notice if you look at the master plan that several local fleets participated. And what we asked them to do was provide us with their fleet data. And at no charge, we analyzed that fleet data and developed business cases for conversion to or transition to one of the several clean fuels that are available to them. And then we program those ideas into our master plan and are actively seeking ways to make those projects a reality. If you are a fleet who would like to have your fleet data analyzed and business cases developed, we would love to do it for you, no charge. We'd love to incorporate you into this master plan. So reach out to Marcy, Elizabeth, or myself at any moment if you'd like to know more about that. The Clean Fuels Coalition is a fuel neutral coalition, and that's crucial. That means that of the fuels that we communicate to you about, which include natural gas, both liquefied and compressed natural gas, biofuels, including ethanol and biodiesel, electric fuels, propane fuels, and then hydrogen fuels. We know, and we try to communicate the idea that no one of those fuels is the solution to everything. Every fuel needs to be matched with its use case. And we really advocate the best fuel for the best application. And in some of those applications, it's going to be hydrogen. So we're so happy that we have some experts in the hydrogen sector to talk to you about that fuel today. From my perspective, this is the sort of the hottest fuel out there. A few years ago, it was hard to find information about it, but now it's really everywhere, and it's time to really start to dig in and learn about it, figure out how it might be applicable to your operations. So for that purpose, we've invited Des Carlisle of the Southeast Hydrogen Energy Alliance to speak with us first, and then Jonathan Christiani with Black & Veatch will talk to us second. And they are going to really raise the level of hydrogen understanding in North Florida starting today. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring Des Carlisle into the conversation. If you have questions for Des as she speaks, put them in the chat. You can put your questions into the chat at any moment. You can chat me directly if you don't want anyone to see your question, or you can chat straight to the group. I'll be fielding those questions throughout our event. Same when Jonathan speaks. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will make sure your question get answered. Des, over to you. So happy to have you with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Marcy and the Clean Cities Group for this invitation. We're going to do our best to educate you, but more than anything, hopefully we'll give you tools so that you can dig in even deeper. Like you said, Des Carlisle with the Southeast Hydrogen Energy Alliance. We're also referred to as SHEA. I thought it'd be helpful to just kind of give you a backstory about how I got into this role and also how SHEA just recently relaunched. So a little bit about me. My background was upstream oil and gas, right? Very traditional fuels, worked 10 years in Houston. I moved to Nashville 3 years ago. And I think this story is important because of how it all came together and how traditional oil and gas families are thinking about different fuels now. So moved to Nashville 3 years ago, and I went to work for the Kimbrough family. The Kimbrough family is a long-standing third generation Tennessee, really mid to downstream oil and gas family. They have about 10 companies in their portfolio, including a large JV with Shell. They're the largest privately held light-duty station owners in the state of Tennessee. And when I met Bill, he said, Des, it's hard enough to take a business from first generation to second, much less third to fourth. And I want to think about my grandkids. And he said, I feel like the future's hydrogen. To be candid, I thought our lunch was going great because I had 10 years of fossil fuels and he had 50 years, and this was going to be a great connection. But when he said hydrogen, honestly, I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This was mid 2021. Like I said, had really been in the trenches of oil and gas and really on the exploration and development side of that. And so after about 4 months of convincing, he convinced me to come on and work for the family and really spend the first year learning all I could about hydrogen. So traveled the country, tried to learn from a lot of the experts and learned that it's not necessarily new, maybe more new here in the Southeast, but been going on for a while, and we can dive into that later too. But came back and said, yeah, I think it does fit into the portfolio, but I don't think I would be a good advisor if I recommended you to build a new light duty station in Nashville, Tennessee in 2023 for $7 million, right? And so we started talking about what else could we do? And the Kimbroughs did something I don't see a lot with companies. They said, how do we leave a legacy? How do we prepare the market? It's not just about the ROI. So we started dreaming about a Tennessee business association that could really help educate and prepare the market. So when hydrogen was ready to roll out, we would be ready here in Tennessee. Along those same time frame, I met Dr. Scott McWhorter, who was and still is the chairman of the Southeast Hydrogen Energy Alliance, and a little bit about the organization. So they started in 2006 as a South Carolina Fuel Cell Coalition. So long time they've been an organization. And over time, they really re-envisioned themselves and reimagined that, hey, this is bigger than a state initiative. It really is this regional opportunity. So around 2019, they relaunched to be more of this regional opportunity. And when we met, we realized right away that, hey, we've got a lot of the same visions, a lot of the same missions of what we want to do. They were, like they called themselves, a coalition of the willing, a great group, a strong board of directors, but really no membership yet, no staff. the website, all of those things that we knew were important weren't there. So we actually signed an MOU. We took the Kimbrough's private funding that they were going to put into Tennessee, and for 10 months, we completely redreamt what this organization could be on a regional basis. And so we relaunched April 10th. And it was important for us. How do we deliver day one? So day one, we started on delivering a really good website that had tools where you could go and you could learn. I call it my parents' page, right? That Hydrogen 101 page. 3 years ago, I had no idea there wasn't a tool like that out there for me to just be able to understand how is it produced? How's it stored? How's it delivered? And what are the in-use cases? And then we really set 3 really clear pursuits as an organization. So first and foremost, how are we going to drive innovation and collaboration? We could talk all day, but we wanted to make sure commerce was happening. And how could we help convene companies to make sure commerce is happening on the ground? Second, we put it in the middle because it's the heart of everything we do, and it's how do we educate? I think the person who's going to step on their first fuel cell transit bus, right? How do they feel like they're taking part of something bigger? I think back to like, remember when you got in your first Tesla, right? What were you experiencing, and how could we recreate that here? And so that was important to us. It's important to us to make sure that we're educating the kids. What are elementary school kids and middle school kids learning today about hydrogen? Because hopefully when it's time for them to pick a career path, it's a very rewarding and growth career path. So we want to make sure we're getting there. We want to make sure we're aligning with technical universities so that our workforce is ready as these innovations continue to roll out. And then our final pursuit was really, how do we enable policy and regulation? So we never want an innovation to sit on the shelf, right? We don't want an innovation or an investment to come to the Southeast and then it can't be rolled out because the policy's not ready. Or maybe the regulation in this small town isn't ready because it still has hydrogen gas classified as an industrial gas instead of more in line with like a CNG. So lots of different opportunities there. We do cover 10 states. It's Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So that's a little bit about our organization. I know we're going to dive into a lot of Q&A, but just wanted to kind of give the story of where we are and how we've come to kind of rebirth in the last couple months.
Thanks, Des. And as Des mentioned, we will have more of a conversation later on in the program. Now I want to pivot over to Jonathan Christiani with Black & Veatch. Jonathan's got a slide deck that he's going to share with you regarding their firm's efforts in this hydrogen space. Jonathan, take it away.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Des. Great tee up for me. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a real privilege to be here. As Ben noted, I'm Jonathan Christiani. I'm Black & Veatch's Bioenergy and Hydrogen Tech Manager. So I really, it resonates what you said, Ben, about being kind of clean fuel agnostic. I work across all sorts of different clean fuels myself, all the way from hydrogen, which we'll discuss today, to liquid biofuels, renewable natural gas, solid biomass, everything kind of in between. So we're very much in the same camp there. Everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Well, not to take you off guard, but pop quiz time right out the gate. Curious, and you guys can just type your answers in the chat here. Who knows what form hydrogen is most prevalent here on Earth? Go ahead and type them in, and we can talk about that as we move through here. Yeah, Jeff, you've got it. Yeah, you guys got it. We're talking water. And so electrolysis is going to be one of the major production technologies that we talk about today when it comes to clean hydrogen. Basically the conversion, the electrochemical splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen using renewable energy. So looking forward to that. Real quick, Black & Veatch is a global engineering construction company. We've been around for 110 years almost. We're about about 12,000 professionals these days, spread across all the countries you can see here. Very great place to work. I mean, we're constantly getting recognized with awards and different recognitions, and our whole business is related to the delivery of sustainable infrastructure solutions. So I kind of work in our fuels and natural resources group, focused on clean fuels, like I mentioned before. Now at Black & Veatch, we're very highly safety conscious. We're responsible for all these different projects across the globe, and so a big part of what we do as part of workshops like this is start with a safety moment. Today, I wanted to talk about corporate safety culture and kind of how you build both from the top down as well as the bottom up to achieve, lower incident rates. And especially in the hydrogen industry, it's something that we're pretty hyper focused on. It's about empowerment. It's about making everybody feel responsible for safe operations, safe practices. We're trying to protect people first, get everybody home safe, property and environment next. And what it requires is continuous training, continuous development, a means of raising issues, an attitude. Engineers are very prideful about their designs, but we have to allow our designs to be evaluated by others and get some insights on additional safety measures that might be taken. And as we adhere to this safety culture, we get better over time, and the incidents start to decrease. And it's prevalent in the chemical process industry. It's going to be prevalent in all the things that we're going to talk about within the hydrogen industry as well. So why hydrogen? Why are we here today? Why are we talking about this? Why is this guy yelling at me? The cool thing about hydrogen is it's very versatile. We can produce it in a number of different ways. We can use it in a number of different ways. It's applicable as a feedstock for other chemicals, derivatives as they're known. It can be used as an energy carrier, similar to electricity. We can use it as a transportation fuel, which I think this audience maybe has some of the greatest interest. And furthermore, we can produce it a number of different ways and use it in all these different ways. So in some cases, we're very limited in terms of what options we have for decarbonization, especially some of those hard to abate sectors like aviation, transportation, some of the steel and cement type industries. So I want the team to start thinking in terms of hydrogen in a similar vein as batteries, in that it's an energy carrier. It can be used for all these different purposes, and it's actually quite complementary. So you can see on this slide some of the different ways that we think about battery electric vehicles and how fuel cell electric vehicles with clean hydrogen kind of complement that, especially when we start thinking about medium and heavy duty vehicles. Buses is something that Des mentioned. We're using hydrogen in all these applications today, and we're in kind of late stage prototyping fleet, pilot fleet type stuff for medium and heavy duty applications. So there's really a lot of excitement around fuel cell vehicles, but chicken and egg. We need to have infrastructure to support those endeavors. I mentioned, as we think about transitioning our mobility sector to be zero emission, one pathway is not enough. You can't put all your eggs in one basket versus the other. It's nice to have diversified options here. And that could mean taking the carbon out of gasoline and diesel. That could mean other gaseous fuels, like Ben mentioned, CNG and propane and the like. And that certainly means also hydrogen and batteries as well. The two infrastructures are different. Ostensibly, you're charging with one and you're refueling with another, but they can be complementary, especially in the sense where some of these high power DC fast chargers, you may not have the bandwidth to be able to interconnect to get things done quickly. And so hydrogen can actually be nice complement to that. And it could also be the cheapest option in certain cases, in certain geographies with certain duty cycles. And some of that is being proven out now, especially for those heavy duty applications that I mentioned. So stepping back, I mean, Hydrogen 101, it's all what you learned in chemistry class, however many years ago. Hydrogen is a very abundant, it's the most abundant element in the universe. It exists as a diatomic gas, so two molecules together. And it's colorless, odorless, pretty simple and easy. It's very light, so that makes it quite buoyant. But because it's light, it can get blown around by the wind. So if we're venting hydrogen, for example, and there's a lot of wind outside, yeah, you're going to see that hydrogen kind of blowing all over the place. It's got a really wide flammability range. Okay, the widest of any substance in the universe. So that's where we start to get into safety related issues. And it's also very diffuse. So once it's released to the atmosphere, it's going to form a non-flammable mixture quicker than most other gases. When we think about hydrogen as an energy resource, as an energy carrier, you often want to try to compare it to other fuels we're more familiar with. So a kilogram of hydrogen is roughly equivalent to a gallon of gasoline from an energy basis. And it also contains the same amount of energy as 117 cubic feet of natural gas, but at standard temperature pressure, that kilogram of hydrogen occupies 421 cubic feet. So on a gravimetric energy density basis, it's very dense. On a volumetric basis, quite the opposite. So it's less energy dense than natural gas, what we're used to. And I've included some cool little quick back of the envelope conversions for you in case you're interested. I joked with the team before the call here. If I needed to, I could spend 4 hours on this chart alone, covering the value chain. But I won't bore you like that today. But what I really love about this graphic is that it succinctly kind of summarizes all the different production methods that we're talking about, how we get the water, the electricity, the fossil-based resources, we convert them through the production pathways that are depicted in the blue circle. And then we have all these different versatile end uses that I alluded to before. Typical applications, we're making chemicals. Ammonia and methanol are two of the biggest chemicals that are produced from hydrogen today. We can distribute it in our gas distribution network. We can use it for power generation, and that's a strong interest there in Florida, as well as elsewhere. And then mobility. So everything down to forklift trucks that are used in like Amazon distribution warehouses. Like that's a pretty big use for hydrogen today. Through buses and vehicles and LDVs and MDVs, like I said, up to trucks and aviation. So we'll touch on all this stuff today. Please provide any questions that you have in the chat there. As you guys get to know me, what you'll find is I'm not a fan of the colors of hydrogen, although they're effective as a media tool to kind of simplify the different pathways. And the reason is because I would rather have a discussion around carbon intensity. Carbon intensity is why we're in the clean fuels business, right, team? And so really at the end of the day, the colors of hydrogen may represent one thing or another. But what we're talking about is carbon intensity. And so there's not a color for every last pathway. You can kind of see here some of the different pathways that we think about. And these are all just relative figures. There's no hard numbers behind it. The most important thing is there's no industry-wide agreement on what the colors actually mean. We do our best to try to keep up with how they're being used, but sometimes they have different definitions depending on where you are in the world. Most of the low carbon infrastructure that low carbon hydrogen infrastructure that we're talking about nowadays is related to green hydrogen using renewable energy and electrolysis. like I alluded to before. And blue hydrogen is of significant interest. That way we can continue to use the fossil-based resources that we have, and in combination with carbon capture, can reduce the carbon intensity. So lots of different options, lots of different conventions. I won't bore you by going through all of these, but these are about as many as I've been able to gather on a self-consistent basis over the years. Everybody's eyes just went crossways, so no worries. I'm not going to read this chart to you, but I do want you all to have a set of data here to kind of compare some of the different properties between these common fuels, hydrogen, natural gas, gasoline, especially when we're talking about comparing them on a techno-economic basis and our ability to understand where hydrogen fits best. I'll remind you that the flammability range is pretty wide, so we need to manage those risks accordingly. I would also point out to you this minimum ignition energy. So even just like a spark, an electrostatic discharge, like if you're walking around the house in socks, can cause a jet fire or an explosive event. So yeah, we really need to be cognizant of, for example, electrical area, hazardous area classification in our designs, and make sure we've got the right electrical equipment that's going into these facilities. Other risks and hazards associated with hydrogen. The big one is leakage, right? Because it's such a tiny little molecule, it just wants to escape and go all over the place by itself. So we need to have a means of leak detection, gas detection, a means of understanding if there's a hydrogen fire. Hydrogen burns nearly invisible to the naked eye. So you need specialized flame detectors, unless you just see something melting in front of you, and that's usually a good sign you have a hydrogen fire as well. But we do want to, minimize or get rid of all the ignition sources. We want to understand how to combat an incident if it occurs, whether it's a flame or it's an explosive event. Deflagration, it basically refers to an explosion under the sound barrier. A detonation is above. You can be asphyxiated by hydrogen, folks. So yeah, I would be afraid if there's that much hydrogen present personally from an explosive standpoint, but it does displace oxygen. It can cause asphyxiation as well. And then when we start getting into liquid hydrogen, which is at cryogenic temperatures, that's where we're getting into a whole host of new risks as well. Frostbite. Literally, it's so cold, it's going to condense air. So we want to make sure it's well contained in insulated vessels and piping and stuff. As soon as you start condensing out air, now you have oxygen enrichment going on, and that makes a whole bunch of other things more flammable than they normally would be. So these are all just some of the hazards that we're protecting against as part of our infrastructure projects. So real quick, want to touch on storage and transportation since we're doing pretty well on time. Really, hydrogen is transported primarily by pipelines, much like natural gas. It's certainly the most economically prudent choice for large quantities and long distances. And we have quite a bit of hydrogen pipelines here in the US. Most are in and around like the refining, chemical process industry, a whole bunch along the Gulf Coast, some hydrogen pipelines here and there throughout the Midwest and West Coast. Most of the work right now in terms of being able to utilize our existing natural gas infrastructure is focused on the risks associated with hydrogen embrittlement. So at what percentage can we blend hydrogen with natural gas to give it a place to be stored and distributed without risking hydrogen eating through the pipeline basically and causing leaks and the like. A lot of R&D going on in that space, but there's a lot of interest in taking advantage of this however many millions or tens of millions of miles of pipeline that we already have. I think ultimately what we'll see is some amount of blending, and probably some amount of new pipelines that are constructed to support hydrogen distribution. So for domestic applications, less than 1,000 miles, 1,500 kilometers, that's where pipelines are really expected to be most economical. When we start thinking about the global trade of hydrogen and its derivatives, it's really more of a focus on chemical energy storage. So ammonia is a big topic that we'll talk about a little more here in a minute. Liquid organic hydrogen carriers basically can store and discharge hydrogen. You've got methanol in the mix, so there's a lot of different options for producing hydrogen domestically and shipping it to markets overseas, which Florida is likely to be a major player in that industry. Another numbers chart, not going to read it to you, just wanted to give the team a little more info when it comes to what I was talking about earlier, the gravimetric and volumetric energy densities. And when we think about using hydrogen as an energy carrier, it's also helpful to think in terms of round trip energy efficiency. So gaseous hydrogen, way up there, not as high as natural gas, but it still is quite useful. Liquid hydrogen, less so. Liquid hydrogen is more going to be distributed in a region predominantly for mobility applications. So we don't count mobility as energy necessarily, even though it technically is. And it's a great way to get by distributing, a larger quantity without the pipeline infrastructure to go yet. And you can see ammonia has some favorable characteristics as well. And that's really why it's being considered as kind of the zero carbon derivative of choice for global trade, like I talked about before. All right, pop quiz number 2. So which of the properties of hydrogen represent the most significant safety hazards? My slide from a couple slides ago. Who wants to take a guess? Please type it up in the chat. I'll give you guys a few seconds. Anybody? No takers? Lack of color, small molecule, flammability. Yeah, Virginia, you've got it. The wide flammability range is definitely one of the biggest safety hazards, and that low auto ignition energy too. We really need to be cognizant of the electrical equipment that we're designing. And so electrolysis, it's very energy intensive. We're pumping lots of electricity into these things. So there's a careful balancing act that we need to do as we're pumping in that electricity and trying to get the hydrogen out so that it remains safe. But nice job, team. Glad y'all were participating there in the pop quizzes. Just a few closing slides. I wanted to at least demonstrate here why ammonia is so important to the industry right now. Not only is it more appropriate and more energy efficient, for kind of global applications, but we're now, starting to see some convergence. Most ammonia today is used in the fertilizer and chemical industry. But as we start to think about ammonia as a hydrogen carrier, we now can start thinking about ammonia as an energy carrier in and of itself. So utilizing ammonia directly, maybe combusting it in a power plant, maybe cracking it back to hydrogen so that can be distributed through domestic pipeline systems or what have you. You can kind of see some of the techno-economics on the upper right-hand side, maybe some historical data about what conventional ammonia costs. So there's some good play here. The challenge is once again building out the infrastructure in order to take advantage of it. And the good news is that we've got a lot of infrastructure focused on ammonia, so we can just plug right into that same value chain, and we're just taking the carbon out along the way. Another big one that's of interest, particularly for the aviation industry, is sustainable aviation fuels. I know there's also interest in hydrogen, using hydrogen directly for electric plane type applications, but that's probably not going to be as major of a factor, at least in the near term. Lots of R&D left to get through that. But if we can use clean hydrogen to produce sustainable aviation fuels, it's the same infrastructure that it is today. We're just taking the carbon out. So over the next several decades, there are some pretty big targets that you can kind of see on the left-hand side for producing sustainable aviation fuel. Whole bunch of different pathways that we could go using biomass, municipal solid waste, other types of sustainable feedstocks in combination with the hydrogen. And then all the different ways, you know, we can do liquid fuels, we can do gaseous fuels, we can do renewable natural gas through methanation. Lots of different pathways that are possible here as we think about the different means that we want to use our hydrogen. So some key takeaways, you know, the versatility, don't forget about that. That's why people care. That's why we're investing all this $8 billion in federal money into hydrogen hubs and the infrastructure associated with it. It can be used as a gas, as a liquid. It can be used as a derivative. And there's strong interest in developing pipeline networks, both for storage as well as transportation from A to B. Liquid hydrogen is probably a little more favorable for the mobility sector itself, just because we've got a long way to go to build out our pipeline networks. And you know, when you think about different project opportunities, you want to be thinking in terms of, okay, what's the carbon intensity? What's my production method? What's my end use? And we're working on projects throughout the world. I can't say who, but we just finished up commissioning a project there in Florida with a major utility client. So these things are happening. It's happening in real time. There's a lot of challenges associated with managing those safety aspects, those hazards that I talked about, but we're working through it, and we're participating on codes and standards boards. We're participating with industry trade associations. We're breaking through all of that. And the hope is that we can get to a place where the economics work out for some of these applications. So really a great time. I've been working in hydrogen for 20 years. So there's never been a more exciting time, at least in my career, than now. So with that, Ben, I'll turn it back to you. We can stop sharing the screen and we can
Thanks,
get into
Jonathan.
some Q&A.
Definitely. And Jeff Nordsick and Doug Conkey have some questions in the chat, and Jeff and Doug, I'll get to them in a second. But first, Jonathan, let me ask you to bring it down to the level of a fleet, because a lot of our stakeholders are operating fleets. And one of your earlier slides, you know, got into that spectrum of application for hydrogen from light to heavy duty, and going all the way up to, you know, aviation. We've got some folks representing that sector as well as the port sector on the phone today. So talk a little bit about the kinds of applications that you're seeing today from a transportation perspective using hydrogen. At first, maybe not even thinking about the economics, but then before you're done, where do you see the sweet spots for hydrogen at the moment in transportation?
Yeah, great question, Ben. We've constructed over like 24 refueling stations, primarily in California, as well as a few in the northeastern US. And a lot of those projects are not as well utilized as they could be. We talked about chicken and egg. So you build a refueling station, that doesn't necessarily put cars on the road. So for the light duty applications, there's still some challenges associated with getting those cars deployed and in people's hands. And then in places where they are deployed, there's challenges on the supply side. Right now, there's probably more cars in California that utilize hydrogen as a fuel than there is hydrogen to support them, and so the prices are a little bit high But a fuel cell vehicle is just as efficient as a battery vehicle. So they do have an efficiency benefit over gasoline. So even if I'm paying like $12 per kilogram at the pump, that would be equivalent to like $6 per gallon of gasoline equivalent because of that efficiency difference. So there's still a lot of interest in light duty, but I think the batteries have a pretty good foothold there. More promise and more hope on the heavy duty side, just because batteries don't afford you much range. I mean, you need a huge battery, in which case you're decreasing what you have for payload. So hydrogen is nice and light. It's going to get you the sorts of ranges that you would be looking for like a long haul application, and that's why there's so much interest in it for those applications. Once again, it's very complementary. Batteries and fuel cells very complementary with one another across the mobility space.
Thanks, Des.
Yeah.
Pivoting over to you.
You want me to touch a little bit on the economics? I know we had talked about that too, the economics of the heavy duty.
Well, sure, go for it.
Yeah, so exactly what Jonathan's saying, like it's a disruptor when we talk medium and heavy duty. If we think of just pure economics of what's it cost to go buy a diesel Class 8 truck versus a fuel cell, it's almost double right now, right? Kenworth, those guys are still even triple. You've got Nikola that costs about $440,000 for a Class 8 fuel cell. The difference in California is you have a state incentive of $220,000 off the top, plus your federal incentive of $40,000. So it becomes much more doable in a state like that. Southeast is different. I don't ever see us having those same kind of state incentives. But I think all of this will be taken care of with scale. And so just to the economics a bit there.
That is a perfect lead into what I wanted to ask you, because we've heard about California a couple of times now, and you know, what works in California, as you just acknowledged, is not necessarily going to work in Florida or the Southeast. So, I mean, this is sort of a leading question, but why do we need a hydrogen energy alliance focused on the Southeast?
Yeah.
And how do we get some of what California's accomplished without maybe using the same methods?
That's how do we learn, right? How do we not duplicate? California is a big state and it has 4 energy alliances within the state. One's been around, the CHBC, California Hydrogen Business Council, kind of the premier organization's been around for almost 30 years. But here, you know, we have a really unique position in the Southeast. Where these 10 states are kind of positioned, we say transportation doesn't end at state lines, and federal policy never aligns at federal lines. And so federal's too big, we think too differently. And state in our region is almost too small. And so the regional approach hopefully accomplishes more. It's definitely a much more advantageous in some days task to think about 10 different states, and no, we can't think 10 states are the same. Shea is getting ready this fall to launch 10 individually state executive working groups. And those working groups will have really clear deliverables of each, but it's also to try to understand on a state micro level of what's going on, and then how do we bring that to a regional approach. So when we were building this organization, we thought it's really important. It can't be a top-down organization, and it can't only be a bottom-up. It's got to be a combination thereof. So we have to have a strategy, and then we have to understand what's going on at the ground level to continue to work that strategy. But we think we have a leverage and a great opportunity from a regional standpoint, especially as we think about deploying education, deploying policies and regulations that align in a lot of ways with the 10 states we represent.
There's obviously, you know, taking a regional approach makes a lot of sense. But the folks on this call are all Floridians. So I'm curious, and you mentioned actually to me before we got on the phone that you were recently down visiting with the Florida Solar Energy Center. So what does Florida need to get ready for hydrogen, and what should these folks on the phone, what do they need to know about their state when it comes to hydrogen?
We spend a lot of time thinking about that as a board, right? So it's important for us that our governing board is actually representations from all the states. So we have Jim Fenton on our board, head of FSEC. Like I told you, spent the day down there and really understanding the great work that that organization's doing. We also have another well, we actually have three Floridians on our board. We have Don Daniels from Mitsubishi Power, and Netta from Siemens Energy. So we think a lot about Florida. We think a lot individually states. We don't know what we don't know yet, right? And so that this first real 8 months of our relaunch is about learning what we don't know. So it's hard to say that, okay, as a region, we should do A through Z. More we want to get on that macro level. And I think that's what these working groups will really start to understand is where is Florida on an education level? Where's Alabama on an education level of hydrogen? Where are your politicians on an education level? A great example is here in Tennessee. Tennessee passed a hydrogen bill through Congress this past session, and the bill was in the wrong unit of measurement. It's kind of funny, but at the end of the day, it's just a lack of education, right? And so how can we educate on the front end? Hopefully we don't even have to lobby. It's just giving that baseline education. And so just trying to understand where each state is really the state we're in right now, is trying to figure that out.
Gotcha. Jonathan, pivoting back over to the economics question, and Des, thanks for jumping in and giving us a sense of the price differential between, you know, a diesel tractor and maybe a hydrogen tractor. But Jeff was asking, he wants to know more about the cost for conversion to automobiles, and I think it would be interesting to know what applications you're seeing for which hydrogen is already penciling out. You mentioned forklifts, Jonathan. Maybe some other examples, and if you can sprinkle in what you know about some of the economics in those different kinds of use cases, I think that would help answer Jeff's question.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that question. The challenging part about low carbon hydrogen is it's still so new, and we're still trying to get down the learning curve of building these projects so that they can be more cost competitive. And yeah, the regulatory incentives are certainly going to factor in as well. Not only the grant money that I alluded to for hydrogen hubs, but there's a pretty significant tax credit that's being discussed right now. We're waiting on final guidance from IRS, hopefully later in the year, to get that done. It's one of the most generous tax credit incentives ever passed by Congress. So lots of promise there. There's still likely to be a differential in certain markets. For example, I alluded to steel and cement. Those are really hard to abate sectors that have really low price points. So what you'll likely see for that end of the spectrum is all these producer side incentives to kind of get the economics close, and then some demand side incentive programs as well. For example, contracts for difference, where there's some subsidies to close the gap. That way the deals can get done, the infrastructure can get built, the lessons can get learned, and it's all facilitating lower costs over time. I mentioned forklifts, so that's on the other end of the spectrum. It's well established, and you can use it today on a pretty economically competitive basis, especially warehouses that use batteries. You think about the duty cycle, you think about how long it takes to recharge battery-powered forklifts, and you start to see that hydrogen not only saves money, but if you can source the hydrogen for cheaply enough, it can actually be cheaper on $1 per hour of forklift operation type thing. So forklifts have been around for a while. The rest of the mobility sector, I'd say hydrogen will probably be a little more competitive for those long haul heavy duty applications than it would be for light duty. We still got pretty cheap gasoline here in the US, even though we've seen some price bumps. So how can we identify some of the public transit and heavy duty long haul applications where hydrogen's a little better fit with closer economics on $1 per mile basis. It's something that's a work in progress.
So decarbonization is obviously an attractive driver for hydrogen, but another thing that people are interested in that is related but different, and particularly in Florida, is resilience. So many of our folks on the phone here not only operate fleets, but they operate mission critical operations. For instance, David Dunkley with the airport, that airport really needs to be able to function, without interruption. Jeff Nordsup with St. Johns County, he's got certain aspects of the county that they have to be up and running at all times. So people are both interested in using alternative fuels in their fleet, but they're also thinking about how can we guarantee that we will have uninterrupted services in our mission critical operations. So are there synergies between what hydrogen can do for your fleet as well as what they can do for your facilities? And does that
Absolutely,
affect
Ben.
economics?
Yeah, and in those instances, I would say economics are less critical. But I'll caveat that by saying there's a lot of work with, for example, the major IT companies, the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks. They're strongly interested in hydrogen as a backup fuel for their data center applications. And we're talking huge amount of power to power some of these things, and along with it, a huge amount of hydrogen that would be needed. So from a resiliency perspective, I would say as long as we've got a good plan to store and resupply the hydrogen, then it can be very supportive of some of those resiliency goals. And that's some of what we're seeing in California. I mentioned the lack of supply and the high prices as a result of it. If you don't have enough producers who are able to produce and get it to market, then yeah, you're going to have empty cars who are trying to refuel. And that's a big part of what this hydrogen hub bipartisan infrastructure law is seeking to address. It's looking to set up a couple of key centers around the country to build some of the infrastructure, to prove out some of the more advanced technologies, and to increase the resilience accordingly.
Let's talk about safety. Doug Conkey had a question about it. He's listening to your safety message closely and figuring that maybe this is a big limitation for hydrogen. What would you say is hydrogen not appropriate for the mass market? Should it be viewed with suspicion for the typical organization? Do they need particularly sophisticated safety protocols to deal with this fuel? Should they just pass on by hydrogen because of these safety considerations? What's your take on that?
Sure. No, that's a great question. Certainly in light of the Hindenburg, you want to be able to deal with the PR, the public relations challenges as they come up. Yes, we do want to be educating the public on some of the fundamentals that we talked about during today's webinar. But no, we don't need to have every Tom, Dick, and Harry be a hydrogen safety expert. A lot of that comes down to how we design the equipment. What are the safety systems in place to prevent incidents should they occur? Almost the vast majority, there's a whole world of lessons learned from hydrogen safety incidents. If you ask the 5 whys and get to the root cause, you're usually looking at human error. That's a driver for many of them. And so that's where it comes down to engineering design, either projects, infrastructure itself, or products. So we work very closely across the industry with original equipment manufacturers who are producing this stuff, and how are we incorporating the fundamentals of hydrogen safety that we talked about today to prevent those accidents. So I'm hopeful. I think humanity, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, but there certainly will be applications where there's just too many risks to utilize hydrogen, and those are the instances where we might go with another clean fuel or electrification.
Gotcha. I mean, I think people forget that gasoline and diesel are also dangerous fuels that create incidents and all, really regularly. But yet we've engineered a whole system around their safety, and that's benefited us. And there's no reason why we can't do that for other fuels. But Des, you mentioned education being a strong pillar of what your organization's all about. When you were talking to the various stakeholders that you're focused on, how do you address this safety concern? I mean, because Jonathan brought up the Hindenburg. I mean, that's certainly the first thing that, pun intended, flashes in front of your mind whenever the word hydrogen comes up. How do you take that issue on with folks that you're talking to, Des?
Yeah, great question. It is one of our biggest initiatives, right? Is we can't just jump to what is hydrogen before we talk about the safety and the risk, because to both of your points, that's what's on their brains, right? And so we do that through a lot of different ways. I think Jonathan touched on it, but there's an immense amount of companies that use hydrogen today. Companies we all know and trust. This isn't some lofty, only this company you've never heard of. I mean, every Amazon distribution center you drive by, every Walmart distribution center you drive by, Bridgestone, companies that we rely on daily for our goods are trusting it with their employees on these forklifts every single day. So trying to take it out of this big, scary thing to we've already deployed it. It's working. It goes back to exactly what Jonathan said. It's about how we deploy it. It's about the equipment and how we transport it, right? How we fuel it, that all those safeguards are in place. And so we talk about that a lot as an organization, but then also on the groundswell, basically, of safety is making sure individuals, making sure people like my parents, people who aren't in hydrogen every day understand that it's with companies you use every day. And then I would say, I know we talked about this, but really, when we went to relaunch, it was important for us to establish really good tools to educate people on truthful, credible, trustworthy information and not hide things, just here are the facts. And so that's really what we try to develop in our website. And it has an entire Hydrogen 101, but it also every single week updates with different resources. There's a massive catalog there where you can go into all kinds of safety.
I would encourage everyone on the phone to visit Shea's website. It really is beautiful, and you did a great job with it, Des. Wanted to ask a follow-up question. There are some on the phone who really value innovation and being on the bleeding edge of technology in their operations, but many of our stakeholders really don't view themselves that way. They want to adopt a technology when it's mature and makes economic sense and is going to drive benefits to their bottom line, and that all the safety issues have been worked out. So how should they think about hydrogen from that context? What should they be keeping abreast of to make sure that they're ready when the time is right for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think there's advantages to all different stages of investment, right? There's first mover advantage. There's also proven technology advantage. I think it's just keeping up with the news, keeping up with what's going on, being on webinars like this one, making sure like every Wednesday we drop like the latest news of the week on LinkedIn. And so just keeping your finger on the news and then trying to understand how does it fit into what you do, right? Here with the Kimbrough family, we do light duty fueling stations. We don't produce per se. We do transportation and downstream. And so we have to think about how does hydrogen fit into what we do and not create a business around a concept that we don't do. We have 70 years of doing what we do really well. It's just moving a molecule. So how do we fit that in and not go and produce per se?
Jonathan, I'll give you the final question, and this is, what do you think is going to be the killer mainstream application for hydrogen within the next, say, 5 years that we need to know about?
Oh, that's a wonderful one to close out here. I mean, me personally, I've always worked in the energy sector, so I'm most excited about that. We're building a major hydrogen production and underground storage facility in Delta, Utah, referred to as the Advanced Clean Energy Storage ACES project. So the hydrogen that's stored there, it's going to take basically renewables coming from the Midwest to the West Coast, use the excess electricity to produce hydrogen stored underground, and then co-fire hydrogen with natural gas in a power plant across the street. That one is super exciting to me. The economics are probably not there yet, but it's a major early mover in that space, and that's exactly why we care about hydrogen as a means for long duration energy storage, because it can be used there, yes, but you know, the versatility is such that once you produce it, you can use it in all these other applications. I think the economics work best for mobility. And that's the one that most of my clients are most excited about. You've got higher price points. You can be competitive with other types of transportation fuels at higher levels. The infrastructure isn't there yet, and it's still pretty expensive. So we need to get better at producing that equipment more cheaply. And my company, you know, companies like mine, installing it in a more light touch manner with all the same safety considerations in place. And yeah, we need to stick the landing here like a gymnast when it comes to the heavy duty market. That is really going to be the telltale if hydrogen as a transportation fuel is going to work out. And we got, you know, a lot of trucks on the road, so we got a lot of infrastructure to build to keep up with it.
Thank you, Jonathan. If you want to learn more about Jonathan and Black & Veatch, Victoria just put a link to their website and their hydrogen page into the chat. And if you want to learn more about Dez's organization and her really beautiful website, go check it out. That's also in the chat. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Des, so much for introducing our stakeholders to this topic. Folks on the phone, you know, this is the first time we brought you some hydrogen information and won't be the last. You know, the time when you could kind of ignore hydrogen is over. It's now time to kind of keep tuned into this whole emerging fuel. We'll help you do it. Thank you for your time today, spending your lunch hour with us. We really appreciate it. We look forward to being with you next time when we bring you another clean fuels topic. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Thanks so much for having us, Ben.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
everybody.